Thank you guys for coming. So welcome to Magic the Gathering Mental Health, the hero's journey. So I'm CJ, this is Zach. We're friends tenuously, mainly because we are Magic rivals and we talk a lot of smack to each other about that. We're card game enthusiasts, we play a lot of tabletop stuff, and today we're going to talk about Magic Gathering, which is our favorite card game, and we're going to be talking about it from a psychological perspective. We're mostly going to be talking about a paper by this guy, J.S. Hauser. It's his thesis paper. It's called Cardstock and Containment, Exploring Therapeutic Effect in Magic the Gathering for Adults. It's a really interesting paper. If you like reading long psychology papers, highly recommend. But we are going to summarize most of it so you don't have to do that. Most of what we're going to be talking about today is the therapeutic impact on an individual and group level. So we're going to go ahead and get into it. So we wanted to put up this disclaimer first and foremost, basically just saying, I can't see that, we're not mental health professionals, we're just some guys. None of this stuff that we're saying is advice or like therapy. All Magic experiences are subjective. If you or anybody you love needs help, you should consult a mental health professional or call a crisis hotline. And then another thing we wanted to mention is Magic the Gathering can have a gambling aspect. So if you have a gambling problem, maybe not the game for you, or you can get proxies or buy singles. Yeah, just take care of yourself.
Shall we? Right, so I'm going to just touch on the way that we're going to go through this here. We're going to talk about planar origins, really just kind of getting into the meat of what Magic is. Then we're going to focus on the individual, which is the therapeutic aspect from the individual. We're going to get into more group stuff, pod stuff, centered there. We're going to very briefly talk about Hasbro. And then we're going to be done. It's going to work that way. Hope you guys enjoy.
Okay. So we can talk a little bit about the origins of Magic, who we are, and how it all ties to mental health. So if you're at this panel, you should probably know this. Magic the Gathering is a card game. It was developed by Richard Garfield and it's published by Wizards of the Coast back in the 90s. That's the gist of it. I hope you all know that, and if not, welcome. And then we also wanted to mention that planeswalkers are a big part of Magic the Gathering. If you're a Magic fan, you know that planeswalkers are the heroes of Magic, sometimes the villains. And if you play Magic the Gathering, you too technically are a planeswalker. And then we want to talk about Commander too.
Right. I mean, we're primarily Commander players. Me exclusively, entirely a Commander player. CJ here plays other formats from time to time, which is, you know, a choice, I suppose. But Commander is a 100 singleton card format, meaning you have a commander, you can build around the color identity, and you can have one copy of each card that isn't a basic land. We just wanted to touch on that a little.
So this is who we are. We picked each other's pictures, only the most flattering. So we're going to introduce each other. So this is Zach. Zach has been playing Magic for 25 years. He plays a lot of red, white, and black, which is a choice. And he's an archaeologist, he's a teacher, and he's pretty good at Magic, I'll give him that.
This is CJ. He's been playing Magic for 12 years. He plays inconsistent colors that aren't top choices, I would say. He is a writer. He does a lot of marketing stuff.
I do.
And he's all right at Magic. Shall we?
So we're going to first dive into the individual, Magic's impact on a single person, and how it affects their mental health.
Right. So Magic for progress and structure, like becoming a better and brighter person by playing the game. Throughout the paper, the Hauser paper that we read, there was a lot of interviews, articles, and blog posts published by a bunch of different people. They really touch on the idea that like going to an LGS or going to like a local game bar near you and meeting a bunch of different people help you create understanding and acceptance of new and different people, which we find unequivocally true. Like, it is very accurate. We're from Philly. I go to a bar queen and rook all the time, and that is met, and they have a commander knight. And through that experience, I've met so many different kinds of people, different in, ideology, whatever they believe, whatever they do, but it's all about like the game, and it's just this pure experience where you are four people who just want to have fun together, right? Still focusing on the individual is this idea that magic saves lives. This is something that, we can't really confirm, but other people can share their experiences in one way or another. Like former pro Magic player Jacob Van Lunen, he wrote an article that went really deeply into the fact that he attempted suicide. And after that suicide attempt, Magic is one of the main things that helped him figure out what to do next, because it helped give him a sense of purpose, it helped give him meaning, and it just overall made him realize that he was worth something and continue going, right? Another author, Christopher B., noted that in his battle against cancer, what helped him push through all of the treatments, all of the procedures, and everything else was his desire to play Magic with his favorite friends again. So this idea that this one game can really help on an individual level is true to a point, right? So while Magic can be described in many ways, we want to emphasize that it is absolutely a viable tool to pull yourself upwards and motivate and find meaning in yourself if you're feeling lost. I feel like this is especially true for me. I got back into Magic really heavily during the COVID lockdown, right? We're all familiar. It was fun. We all had a good time. So I got really into Commander then, and then I started playing with one of my buddies because I was helping him watch his kids, as I didn't have a job at the time. So that was my wife and I's bubble was this guy Dan King, and I would go over and we were playing Magic, and then someone in his bubble would come over and they started playing Magic too, and then the idea, the pod started growing. And it was a very organic growth of the pod, and now the pod has so many people in it, but it just helped all of us feel better during this time where everything was scary and you just didn't know what was going to happen next. We hadn't lived through anything like that before. We were all not sure where we were going, really. So this is just more reinforcement of these previous two ideas. Magic and the healing process, distraction and new focus. Now I'm going to get personal. 2 years ago, it was August, my sister attempted suicide, and I was very involved in the process of helping her with her kids, helping her husband with her kids, helping her find treatment, and I was burnt out by the end of August, and I was super depressed. I didn't really know what to think, what to do, what to feel. But my wife and I had planned this Vermont trip with a bunch of our friends. Most of them are in this room right now. One of them happens to be next to me.
I was there.
This was totally inadvertent and by coincidence. When we were up there, basically all we did was play Magic. We went out, we did cool Vermont shit or whatever. But we really played Magic, and halfway through that trip, I started feeling normal again. And I could refocus. I felt centered in a way that I hadn't for quite some time. And I was able to leave that trip and go back with the ability to dive back in and help even more. So it helped me just process the events that were happening to me.
Yeah, and for me, I kind of had a similar experience. So back in 2020, I had a major mental health episode. And I also then moved across the country from Philly to Colorado. And I was having a major depressive episode, and it was the height of the pandemic. And, everybody was going through it at that time. And I made new friends and found community by playing Magic. And it was just so much different than if I had just really pushed myself to try new things or meet people in these tacky ways. I remember think I was starting to use like Bumble for friends, which is like a sad sentence to say. But like Magic enabled me to meet people in an organic way that was enjoyable for everybody, and it was not too personal, but it was just personal enough to start to pull me out of that depression and like build my social circle. So that was really important. So speaking of like building your social circle, one thing that probably anyone who plays Magic is aware of is like the pod structure. So a pod is basically just the group of people that you play Magic with. It can be as small as just a couple of people, and it could be as big as everyone at your local game store. My pod's about 10 people. It's pretty modular, so we have different groups that come together. So usually it'll be 4 of us playing Commander, but it could be 3 to 5 of us, playing a bigger game. We get together for Commander once a week, and sometimes we all play together in Draft. And then you have a similar size pod, right?
Yeah, and like the idea of our pod, I think we have like upwards of 15 people now, but we rotate in and out. Usually it's like 5 to 6 people every Thursday for a Commander night, and like I know for most of the people in the group, myself included, like that Thursday night is significant. It matters. Just getting away for a couple hours and just shutting your brain off and playing Magic. I guess not shutting your brain off, because I want to win.
So the pod is interesting. It's community, but we think it's more than that, and a lot of the psychology that we have read about suggests that it is similar to group therapy. We don't want to suggest that Magic can replace group therapy. Sometimes Magic nights are a little traumatic, especially for Zach. But there is a therapeutic element to Magic, and like we've said, we believe that Magic is an avenue to progress and growth and healing, and there are essential therapeutic factors that describe group therapy, and some of them are present in Magic, and we're going to go over those.
And to like touch in on the group therapy idea, not to talk about COVID again, but I know that was like significant for me, especially I was unemployed during COVID, and then last year, 2023, from January to October, I was unemployed. And meeting with my pod every Thursday, like halfway through that, you're getting rejected by jobs left and right because no one's hiring because everything's awesome. And I like ended up really needing that connection and feeling validated that I felt good about something, and like people wanted me to do a thing with them. So I feel as though this is 100% true, but also cannot be a replacement for therapy.
All that said, there are these therapeutic factors described by this psychiatrist, Irvin Yalom. So these are the 11 therapeutic factors of group therapy, and this is what characterizes group therapy. These are the factors. You can look into them a little bit more if you're interested. They're pretty well documented, but we wanted to pull out a few in specific to talk about. These are the 5 factors that we think are like abundantly present when you're playing Magic, especially Commander. So the first one is installation of hope. If you guys have played Magic, if you've played Commander and you're going into Commander night or you're going into a draft environment, you always start out very hopeful, right? Some of that hope is diminished by the end after you've gone 0 and 3, but at the beginning you're like so excited. You're going to get to play with new cards, or you're going to get to play with your favorite cards, or you're going to get to play with new people, and it's just a really exciting, hopeful thing, and that can be really healing. If you're in a low place or you have a lot of anxiety, the idea that you're going to be able to have this new experience or just have a good time is really important, having things to look forward to. I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to that, just having that thing that you're focused on and it's bringing you joy. And another like element of like instilling hope is something that we're going to touch on later, but like having a story to tell after you've had like a Magic night, that's a really important part of making progress. But another element that we wanted to touch on was imparting information. So everybody knows when you play Magic, you impart information about your play style and things that you're doing. But you're also imparting information about each other. So when you play Magic, you can learn about yourself in interesting ways. Maybe you make a really good play and someone says, wow, it's like really interesting or really cool how you were able to like be so patient and make that play. And then you say to yourself, oh, like I'm a patient person, and you're able to kind of work on yourself and have that growth. But on a more surface level, another element is the development of socializing techniques. So Magic is a social game. It's a social interaction. It's a conversation. So you go and you play a game of Magic, and maybe you're a really anxious person, and you're able to overcome that anxiety because Magic's kind of like a filter. You know what I mean? Like it's this thing that enables you to socialize without like this heavy pressure that you might find at like a party or something like that. You know what I mean? Where everybody's more familiar with each other. It creates a level of like distance, but also closeness.
It's like a more casual social environment.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a buffer a little bit.
Yeah.
Another element is interpersonal learning. So Magic provides an opportunity for group members to learn about relationships and intimacy. So, everybody comes from a different experience, and it has like different levels of like socialization, different experiences of that. But you can really get important like support and respectful feedback when playing Magic. So like, of course you're always going to have those people who be like, your deck sucks, I don't like the way you play. But like more often than not, people are going to say to you like, oh, I think it's interesting that you do this, or maybe you could do this better, or you can change the way that you play. There's a lot of opportunities to learn and grow. And then the last element is just group cohesiveness. It's hard to make friends, especially in like a post-pandemic world. And Magic helps you to have a place where you belong, and being in a pod enables you to have a lot of acceptance and just celebrate your values. It can be really nurturing and provide a lot of security. So, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of opportunities to tell stories in Magic, and we're getting into kind of like a nitty-gritty psychology thing here. So everybody knows Mark Rosewater, right? Head designer for Magic. And so he talks a little bit about how the game of Magic is designed to tap into like an emotional resonance, and basically have opportunities to like dive into yourself and develop a narrative about the games that you're playing. And we think this parallels well with like the conditions for therapeutic personality change. So basically, there's a like popular theory in like psychology that the only way that you can have a positive personality change, so like have growth or healing, is through a relationship. Basically, interacting with something or someone is the only way you can create positive change in your life and in your mind. So in a way, Magic is similar to the relationship between a therapist and an individual. In psychology, you have this thing called a minimal relationship. So think about if you have a therapist, you have a minimal relationship with them. It's transactional. And that relationship enables you to expose yourself and make progress to make significant positive change. It also enables you in general to have opportunities to create narratives about yourself, about your mind, about your community. And this kind of ties into like the pet deck theory, right?
Does everybody know what a pet deck is? Yes, no? Okay. The idea of a pet deck is, let's say you're me. Everybody's me now. It's not good. The idea of a pet deck is like my favorite card, for some reason, has always been this card, Tariel the Reckoner. She is a 4-cost angel, 4 colorless, and a Mardu, right? She's terrible, terrible card. And I always build around her. Angels for life, right? So it's Mardu Angel Tribal. And I have had that as my commander for like a good 12 years or so, and I've put so much effort into making that deck less shitty, and it'll one day be there. That day is not today. But like it also ties into like things that I'm interested in, right? Like as CJ said, I'm an archaeologist, and it's a reanimator angel deck. So the idea of like a life-death cycle, the idea of like cultural experiences through, you know, like a religious lens in a way because they're angels, let's say it. It's just cool to me, and I love being able to like put that on my playmat and kind of tell that loose framework of a story.
Yeah, and I also have like a number of pet decks. I would consider all my decks pet decks, but I have one that's like a green-white tokens deck with Kadira, Caller of the Small, and she makes rabbit tokens, which is a silly thing to do, but the idea is that you create a lot of 1/1 power creatures, and you kind of buff them up, or you just collect a lot of them, and they work together to like, overcome bigger enemies. And like for me, that creates a narrative that like resonates with me. Like it's kind of an underdog story. I feel like, it's not uncommon to like consider yourself an underdog. I feel like that narrative is popular in a lot of media, but like it's helpful when, looking at your own life and seeing yourself like as a person who like overcomes and like gets stronger. And I always get that feeling with that deck, you know what I mean? When like I have an army of like 1,000 rabbits, I'm like, we did it. We came together. We overcame the dragons. We overcame Teriel and
Board wipe.
And then board wipe. Back to square one.
Not taking this. Okay. Yeah. But this also like ties into the idea that players have an emotional connection with their color identity, right? I heard you guys talking about someone being what? There you go. As I said, as I did. I'm a Mardu player. I always, 9 times out of 10, that's what I'll build. Yeah, we're on the same page here. You and I are going places. But overall, most people have colors that they specifically like to build, whether it's just they like the play style or they like the narrative of the cards mostly, right? Like if you're playing mono white, like you're going to see a lot of, holier than thou people, angels, like Pegasus, all sorts of fun stuff. Blue, you just want to shit on people. Like, you don't want anyone to have a good time. And I agree with that.
Yeah. And Magic gives you like a healthy environment to do that in,
Yeah, and like, it's no holds barred, right? But it's like, for example, a player might feel uninhibited while playing a red-green deck, which characterizes aggression and freedom. Like we all know Gruul. Like I have a Gruul deck, and it's the Godzilla re-theme of Zilortha. So it's just big stompy things that like to hit, and it feels good because you're just using dinosaurs to hit stuff. But it also could help someone express something that they previously couldn't. It kind of ties into the idea of narrative therapy theory, which insists that the act of sharing and offering emotionally resonant narratives of oneself and exploring them with others can have a therapeutic effect. Group hug, a group hug player. But, like for example, when you build a new deck and you're debuting it for the first time, there's a level of excitement that you're only going to have that one time playing that deck. And then you get to like play it, you play the whole game, maybe you win, maybe you lose. But after that, everyone's like, oh, like you did something really cool, unique with this commander. I never thought about it that way. And you're like, oh yeah, I came up with the idea for so-and-so and such a reason. There is like an emotional resonance there. Did you want to take the Planeswalker thing?
Yeah. So the story of Magic is something that I think a lot of people overlook, but we talked about Planeswalkers a little bit earlier, and there's one particular Planeswalker, Sarkhan. So Sarkhan's story always really resonated with me because he came from a bad place, real bad place. He's literally here being tormented by voices, and eventually he progresses to become like a fully realized planeswalker. One of his cards is called Sarkhan Unbroken, and that always really spoke to me as like a story, and it related to like my mental health, because there was a time where I was going through really intense stuff, similar to, just like feeling really down and really in like kind of a black hole. And then through playing Magic and through making progress in my life and building relationships, I was able to kind of get to this place where I feel like fully realized. And that narrative is really compelling. And there's so many heroes in Magic. There's so many different characters that resonate with different people. And they have these stories that connect to our own stories in life. And that in itself can be healing.
Which brings us to the idea of eat, play, love. It's sort of like meeting new people and it being a generally positive thing. Within this, the original Hauser paper, this guy David Pemberton had an article that was featured, I think, on one of the original Magic news blogs. But he had stated that he had reservations about the type of people that played Magic. That stereotypical idea of Magic players that we all know about, right? But eventually, like, through putting himself out there and going to, like, local meetups or whatever, he discovered that he was able to see past labels and eventually, like, be more himself, feel more comfortable in his own body, and not worry about, like, what other people were thinking, because they're full of shit anyway. These general experiences make you more worldly, right? You're able to, like, go about the world in a different way because you are able to interact with it in a more positive way. But you also learn that Magic has an intensely passionate fan base. Like, the people who play Magic, and they love Magic. And whether you like it or not, those people have quite the opinion on Hasbro owning Wizards of the Coast now. So let's talk about that a little. First, I want to dive into like some of the net positives that Hasbro owning WotC has done for us as Magic players, right? It's more popular than ever now. There was a time in the 25 years that I was playing this game where at one point, like, it was not a solid ground thing. It was set to set. We were like, is this it? Are we done? But we're past that now. It's super popular. It's super successful. Whether you like them, whether you love them or hate them, Universes Beyond is wildly popular. And we're getting more of them. Some of them are more appropriately themed than others. Lord of the Rings versus, I don't know, Fallout. But, that's bringing new people in. And new people coming into the game is great. The more people we get to meet at, like, Commander Nights or drafts or whatever is, like, a very positive experience for the most part. But, that with every positive comes some negatives. I feel like everyone can agree on that. First, I want to talk about, like I said, Magic has an intensely passionate fan base. Dungeons & Dragons does too. So this ties in there. I'm sure if some of you hadn't heard, shortly before Christmas 2023, around 1,100 WotC employees were laid off, core employees for both D&D and Magic the Gathering. And we're gamers, right? We're all here. We've all seen layoffs at studios and everything. I have never seen a more visceral reaction to, like, mass layoffs at a company that makes a game than when that happened to WotC. And that directly and they make almost all of the money that Hasbro makes at this point, right? They are putting up more percentages than any other company or IP that Hasbro owns at this particular junction. And Hasbro still chose to lay off those 1,100 employees, which leaves a lot of people in a really tenuous place with how do you support this game that you love, and that the people that make it love it, and they're getting treated like shit. It also sort of brings up the idea that WotC is making more products than they ever have, especially in regards to Magic. Now, those products are also costing significantly more than they ever have, which we've talked about the pod a lot today. Pods happen predominantly at local game stores, your LGS, right? Now, I know one of the LGSs that I love was having problems with Commander Master specifically because the set was so expensive to buy into and sell that they weren't sure if they were actually going to be able to sell it all. They were afraid. There was a lot of anxiety there. And I don't feel like a game store should feel that way for doing what it does, right? Game stores selling games and they're like, I don't know, I don't know if I'm going to be able to sell this game. When it's the most successful card game on Earth. And that's directly because of the Hasbro interaction with WotC, Magic and Dungeons & Dragons becoming as massive successes as they are. It's really tough. And what I wanted to do was play a video that I don't think is in the slide anymore. Oh, no, it is. So I wanted to talk about, I mentioned one of my favorite LGSs. I'm going to shout out another one. It's not really an LGS, but Queen and Rook in Philadelphia, I would go there. I love it. We wanted to close out by supporting one of our LGSs, and luckily, timing-wise, they just put out a commercial. So I'm just going to go ahead and not play it for you, I guess, because I'm not connected to the internet. That sucks. Wow. Wow.
That's unfortunate.
Look it up. Great commercial. It's
Red Cap's
40
corner.
seconds long. You get it. You'll love it.
Yeah, support your LGS. It's a great way to meet people, make friends, and hopefully improve your mental health.
So, we wanted to thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you guys. Really appreciate you spending your time here. And thank you to all of our friends who make this help make this happen. And yeah, thank you so much for coming.
But now we did want to open it up to any questions that anyone has. We can do a little bit of a Q&A because we kind of blew through that real fast. Danny?
Yeah, wow. Call me out by name. Can you read that on my badge? So I have a question. As somebody who's not super competitive, let's say, right, dabbled in Magic, the thing for me was always trying to get over that hump, maybe finding a pod. Would you be able to kind of explain what that entailed, maybe how you found yours? And it's tough for me, like I said, as somebody who's not super competitive, I'm going to get beat up every night if I go. But
You want to take this one?
So you're asking how the best way to find a pod?
I mean, I feel like if I was to just jump into any LGS, I would be, I would go 0-4 every night.
Yeah.
But how can I make that fun?
How to make it fun if you suck and find a pod at your skill level.
I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's really about finding a pod at your skill level per se. I mean, I have a guy in my pod who loses regularly because he's a terrible player. He had no interaction at all. But he has fun. For him, the journey is deck building. And I'm also that way too. I mean, I'm ultra competitive in a non-competitive way because I build garbage. But the idea of just getting around a table and just doing something for a couple hours, whether you're good at it or not, doesn't really matter per se. But Magic is one of those games where the more you play it, the better you're going to get. Seeing the cards on the table and learning how things interact. I mean, I've been playing this game for a long ass time, and there's still interactions literally every time I play Magic where I'm I didn't know that's how that worked, and it just breaks my brain. But you can also have that. The rule zero conversation that is so important in Commander where it's hey, I'm new, I'm newer to the game and I'm just trying to get into it. I understand deck building a little bit. This is a pre-con that I edited a little bit maybe. Do you guys have anything that maybe won't turn 3 combo win kill me?
Yeah.
Can we do a little bit more casual? And 9 times out of 10, you will have that experience. You will get what you're looking for just by like having that conversation.
Yeah, that rule of zero conversation is really important for setting expectations. But also to like talk about how to just like find people to play with, especially like-minded people. I say you really want to like take that risk in your everyday life. Maybe it's at work or school or just like another club that you go to or like any social situation that you have. Maybe it's like your online community. Mentioning that you play Magic is a little scary because like it has like a stigma, like we said, about some of those like more toxic players, but mentioning that you play Magic to people can be really fruitful. That's how I've made a lot of friends and like built my pod. But just mentioning, like, you know, when someone says, so what are you into? What are your hobbies? Just like mentioning to them, you know, maybe it's not the person that you expect that you're going to play with, saying like, yeah, I play a lot of Magic the Gathering. That's how Zach and I met. We were literally like at community college and like standing outside and like I just mentioned Magic the Gathering and he like looked at me, he like locked eyes with me and was like, you play Magic the Gathering? And like he was like so stoked on it. And you know, that's what formed our friendship and that's what landed us here in this exact spot. And yeah, it's just have the confidence to make that initial connection and say like, yeah, this is what I'm really into. And you'll be surprised who plays. A lot of interesting people play Magic.
Anyone else? Yeah.
I like to diss my friends that 1/1 Pegasus is flying the best card.
That's a hard
But you
sell.
have to accept that your friends are just wrong. I can't help you there. Maybe get some new friends.
He asked how he can convince his friends that a 1/1 Pegasus with flying is the best card in the game. Well, you can just tell them that flying is the best ability in the game. Start there. Because, like, nobody's got reach out here.
And then I win, and then they're just like, that's not the reason why. I'm still on the field. I don't know what to tell you. Wonder to my grave.
Any other questions there? In the back. All right. Yeah, hat guy.
Mine's not really a question of much development. My knowledge that Zach and I were in high school together, and when my dad was dying of cancer, he came over every day to play Magic with us.
Yeah.
And it meant a lot to him and to me. And the happy part is that he came through. And that like that. The treatment in med only did so much, and Zach coming over is like a really big part of it. And so I think that's really cool. And it ties into a lot.
Yeah, it does. It definitely does.
Not me crying at my own panel.
Thank you, Max. Any other questions? Yep.
Yeah, so for me, Magic definitely is very therapeutic, but I want everyone from this panel. I'll give you like a little backstory, like I guess the situation that I find my current play group in.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it started with just like of my play group, I probably wasn't looking to probably the front group of all how to play and whatnot, and then look towards things when I wanted ruling questions and things like that. And it started as like an intimate group. We get together on Thursday and we play, we great time. Since then, you know, like newer players have come on, which is great. I love teaching newer players like how to play Magic and everything like that. But our friend group, so we call ourselves like MAGFest, right?
Mhm.
A bunch of people up in the MAGFest, in Long Island. It's evolved into a situation where a lot of people have like, I guess, levels of FOMO that have like, I guess, I don't want to say interlope into the like Thursday night Magic individuals that we do play with, but it has become a larger situation of a bunch of people coming that play Magic and don't play Magic, and the play group now has evolved into a situation where it's significantly less therapeutic for myself. I don't play Magic, I know that's a the game,
Right.
and it's very calming and relaxing playing, but it's not a good situation where there's so many people. The games now take like 3-4 hours just for like a 4-person game typically. So many people in like the vicinity that's distracting maybe players with like smaller attention spans, distracting newer players.
Right.
And it tends to follow myself to mitigate or manage the game to a level where I look towards people's triggers, make sure people are responding accurately, respecting the stack, following the admin rules. So it's become a situation which is very much less therapeutic for myself and more stressful. And that I've even just like edged not to play as much.
Right, yeah.
Because of how it's evolved. Now I know there's like another player that feels similar to myself. And we have encountered situations where how do you tell some people like maybe don't come if they're not going to play, or they're going to be very distracted, or hate, like, slow down the games, or it's not going to be as fun for everybody. How do you bring up these conversations? We have had in the past, and it has had very negative backlash, so to speak.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's a really personal thing, and like that could be really challenging. I would say we're not like experts on, like therapy or like the social stuff, but I do have some like personal experience with stuff like this. I think it's difficult, but I think you have to have some level of like candor with these conversations. So you have to be willing to like have a little bit of an uncomfortable situation or an uncomfortable conversation. So that willingness, I think, is the first step. But I think coming to it with a lot of empathy is also a good way to start. I think you can say to maybe, the other players in your pod, say to them like, hey, I really miss the more intimate nights that we had, the more intimate games that we've had. Does anybody else feel that way? And kind of surveying those players and seeing if they feel similarly. And then if they do, which I'm sure probably they do, you know what I mean, I'm sure they also miss that element of it. It might be good to maybe suggest like maybe once, you said you play about once a week?
Yeah, like about once a week. Like with like my closer friends on Tuesdays are going to be LGS, which I tend to have a lot more fun because obviously those games move a lot faster. There's all like closer friends and whatnot, but like Thursday night, those people that I play with is where it's become like a coffee of individuals and the games last forever.
Yeah, you could always try like instituting like once a month, if you're playing every week, so that's 4 times a month, maybe one out of those 4, you say, hey, this one is going to be just like a more, you can frame it as like more competitive or more like focused and say like, no, but just the 4 of us, and we're going to try to play some fast games this night, and just being really candid about that.
Right, like I've actually had to deal with this experience both with Magic and D&D. Like people coming around when you're playing D&D and just not playing is kind of super distracting. And there's like a right and a wrong way to handle this situation, right? Like you can get angry and be a dick, or you can not. And I found that when you like just come at it empathetically and you're like, hey, like this really bums me out. Like I used to like look forward to this and like almost needed it just to like recharge. That like one. Like, I totally get that idea, right? The therapeutic idea of Magic is why we're here. And meeting with my pod on a weekly basis is very important to me. It's actually, like, I'm bummed out that we didn't get to do it because we meet on Thursdays, right? So we're here. Well, half our pod is here and the other half isn't. So I think that coming at it from just, like, I'm concerned and, like, this is I just want to bring up my well-being, right? And it's not like a selfish move to do that. It's just being out there and being like raw. And sometimes that's super difficult to do. But that would be how I would handle it.
Yeah.
Oh, no, go. Yeah.
Last night they were playing Magic and whatnot, and they invited me, like, almost everybody that was there was like, yeah, we should go play, blah, blah, blah. So they I even expressed my concerns, situations like, well, we have like one friend that likes to have it on like the center of like the social aspect, like the house or hotel room and whatnot. That's what we decided to play. And the people that were asking to play, I was like, well, try carefully. You got probably a good solid like 45 minutes to an hour before that becomes like a packed room, and you're not going to get to play. And lo and behold, by the time I got there, like in that hour, it just looked like an awful game to be in. Like everybody was essentially talking, no one was paying attention to everybody's turns and everything like that. The game ended up in a scoop because no one knew what was going on anymore. And it was,
that's rough.
I did not want to be part of it.
Yeah, I would just recommend like an earnest conversation. I mean, you're coming from a real place, you know? It's not like you're just being mean, you know?
Yeah. And if anyone here has ever been in therapy, I statements are really valuable. You know, saying like I feel or, you know, my experience. I think people receive that a lot better than saying like you make this a lot harder to play or, you know, this person makes it harder to have a good time.
Yeah.
I was just trying to add to it. We have those kind of issues in our group as well. Sometimes when you know who the people are and you know who you are within your pod, you can pull that person to the side and be like, listen, you kind of go a little on 10 when we're in a game and it takes the game a little long. I mean, do you have a problem if I can give you a signal to reel it in? So that way, you know, I don't want to put you on blast while we're in our game. I'm not trying to be...
Oh, I mean, that's like an excellent idea because it's...
communicate with you because I mean I know we're all at the end of the day it's a game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like this game shouldn't be like we should have went through a whole Avatar meeting and we still get turned. It's looking kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So I mean I definitely believe if you're that person in your group that like can communicate better than most, I think it would be good to like if you're that guy to pull that person back like listen, can you break it down or if you need me to help you know really bad jam, would that be an issue? Would that fall within? I don't think that would be an issue if you like talk head on.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
A private conversation.
Yeah, because sometimes like doing things like in a group setting and just being like, "Hey, shut the fuck up,"
Yeah, and then now we're
like
now
that can.
Right.
now I gotta see you outside.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right, you.
So I'm somebody who first got into Magic by playing the arena about 5 years ago or so. I've always been curious about playing paper Magic with the social aspect, but I've just never been entirely sure what the best place was to start with that. Like, you all talked about Commander, so I was wondering, does that feel, just generally a whole lot more social than other formats, especially like the 1v1 format we see on arena versus in-person play?
Unequivocally. Like, yeah, Commander is far and away, like, it's aimed to be a more casual format and is inherently more social because of that.
Yeah, but a good way that you might like breach getting into Commander if you don't have a lot of people that you play Paper Magic with. If you ever go to like a sealed or draft or like pre-release event at a local game store and then you're playing some 1v1 Magic, I've met like a lot of people like through my LGS and like they're not necessarily in my pod, but like they also play Commander and we always have that conversation, you know what I mean? There's like downtime between rounds and they say like, you know, I also play Commander and you know, that's a great way to kind of make those connections and find people to play with.
And a good way to break into the Paper Magic scene if you haven't yet, just buy a Commander Precon. Like, there's so many of them now. You have so many options.
A lot of stores have Commander nights as well.
Any other questions?
Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you guys for coming.
Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Happy MAGFest.